What was remarkable to me about the book that it was at once incredibly familiar. There were so many moments that I underlined because they felt like snapshots from my life, from lives I knew, and yet the book is utterly surprising. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you.
So first question I have is, when did you know that you were going to write this book?
Well, it's always weird how a project starts for me. Normally it's like a confluence of a few things coming together all at the same time. And for me, this book really started, as most things do, with language. So somehow I was walking around one day and a sentence popped into my head. And the sentence was, "We heard they were from Mexico." And that sentence is the first line of the second chapter of the book now. And I sort of just carried that around with me for a while, and usually I know something is a fruitful first line if there's like questions embedded in the line. So for me, the questions in that line were like, who is the we? Who is the they? Are they really from Mexico? And then I sort of kept pushing it out and answering those questions as I went. And eventually I pushed it out enough that I had a short story. So the line grew into a short story, and eventually the short story grew into a novel. But I think I was thinking about a lot of things in my life at the time that all of that grew. And one of the things I was thinking about a lot is my dad, who was an immigrant who came from Panama to the United States in 1971. And he came to study chemical engineering at the University of Delaware. And he thought he would get his degree and go back to Panama, where his family lives, still lives to this day. But he ended up meeting my mom. And they fell in love and got married, and he had me, and he had my brother, my sister. He's been here for more than 40 years now, my dad. And my mom and I were talking one day about the way that immigrants, especially Latino immigrants, are typically portrayed in the media. You know, like there's this kind of accepted narrative. And she was saying something along the lines of, no one from the newspaper is ever going to call Pop and ask him his story. And I was like, that's true, and it's a shame, because it's a very ordinary story. That's the reason no one would call. There's nothing spectacular about it, per se, but I thought precisely because of that, as a fiction writer, that was why it was important.
But the ordinary stories are really what I'm looking for when I'm writing a piece of fiction. Like, those are the things that are interesting to me. So I thought I didn't want to tell exactly my dad's story, but stories like his. So I had that in mind as I was going through, and I had the short story growing and somehow into a novel growing. And I think because of that idea, this idea of these ordinary stories, that's what contributed the part of the book, which is, there's these families, they all live in one apartment building together in Delaware. And I really wanted to give everybody a chance at some point, every character a chance to tell his or her story of coming to the United States. So that's kind of where the structure of the book came from thinking about all of that. And I think, both of those things coming together are the ways that I got into the novel.
And I read somewhere that you had originally started to write this from Mayor's point of view, right? And I'm wondering, just in terms of thinking about process and being a writer, what about it made you decide to switch and become this kind of expansive story? Was there a moment where you thought it wasn't working, or you got more excited by another character? Or?
No, I just thought, why not have everybody talk?
Mm-hmm.
Like why? It really did start with Mayor, who's this 16-year-old boy who was born in Panama and whose parents brought him to the United States when he was a young boy, shortly after the U.S. invasion to Alce Noriega. And he feels really like more American than anything else. And I identify with Mayor so much. He's my favorite character in the book, and I think that's why it started with him. But I really just, I had this idea that it would be nice if the spirit of the book was that everybody had a chance and a platform to speak. I mean, the epigraph of the book, which is from a Bob Hickok poem that was in the New Yorker, is, "Let us all be from somewhere. Let us tell each other everything we can." And that was kind of my guiding principle as I was going through the whole thing,
Yeah, one of the things I really love about the book is thinking about this idea of Americanness, and that the, you know, you have created this world in this one apartment complex where so many different people live. As you've noticed, there's this huge diversity of voices, all of them with very different American and immigrant stories. And to think about coming to this country, you're never coming to sort of a generic country. You're coming to a specific place, a specific block, and having to learn both the larger culture and just the culture of the block, who you're allowed to talk to, who's the gossip, who'll get you in trouble, etc. You know, and that was a really, there's thing I think really important about that. I wonder if you've had any pushback to writing an immigrant story. Do you know the question I'm asking? That sometimes I think about this when you go to Latina poetry events, everybody has a mango poem, you know, a poem about mangoes, you know, and on the one hand it's like, are you gonna read your mango poem? But on the other hand, all of our poems are different from each other just because they're about a mango. But I feel like sometimes if you're a Latina writer or any kind of immigrant writer writing about immigration, sometimes people roll their eyes. Has that been your experience at all?
No, actually. I feel like the book has been welcomed actually in a way that I did not anticipate even. And I think one of the places where I've seen that the most is in high schools. Mm-hmm. So I've been going around doing all these events for the book. And lately, it's in paperback now, so I think, you know, the schools, it's easier for them to order the books for their students. So I've been going to all these high schools and talking to the students, and they're just so grateful to have a book that has characters who, in some glancing way at least, look like them. Mm-hmm. You know, and there's other books, obviously, that exist, but to have, like, something new that they can, like, sink their teeth into and get excited about, I've just seen that firsthand, and that's been really gratifying and, you know, and really humbling, I have to say, too. You know, it's interesting, I didn't read almost any Latino literature until I was in graduate school. And I was a reader as a kid, you know, like I would come home with the Scholastic book order form, you know, and I would have like circled all the books that I wanted my parents to buy. And my parents were not really big readers, and they hate it when I tell people that, so I always tell people that. But to their credit, they would buy all the books, you know, that we could basically afford to buy. And so I grew up reading tons of stuff. But everything that I read through elementary school, through high school, even through college, was basically white writers. And then when I was in graduate school, and this wasn't even an assignment, but I just went to a used bookstore one day and I was just browsing around and I bought the Oxford Anthology of American Short Stories. And I took it home, and in it there was an excerpt from The House on Mango Street. Mangoes. But I started reading it, and it was like, I read the first few lines, and I looked up again, and when I looked up, it was as if the whole world had been transformed for me. Because all of the books that I had been reading until then seemed to be saying to me that my white American experience, I'm half Panamanian, half American, my mom's from New Jersey a few generations back, they seemed to be saying to me that my white American experience was the only one of value. And I had been going to Panama since I was a kid, like since I was 8 months old, visiting my dad's family there. And I had like this wealth of experiences, like really rich experiences, because we never went as a tourist. You know, we would just go and like hang laundry on the back line with my grandmother or get, you know, a prescription from the pharmacy or whatever. And I had never written about any of them, because I didn't think they were stories anyone wanted to hear. I didn't think they were worth telling. And I sort of also, I think because of that, by extension, because I never saw like myself in any literature, I started to think maybe I wasn't worth very much, or that maybe I had lesser value. So, you know, I read Sandra's work, and it like changed everything for me. she opened this giant door that I just walked right through. And so it's been really amazing to go to these high schools and be like, you guys are so lucky. You have already read House of Mango Street, but then to see them read my book and feel like in some small way that's like part of some kind of tradition now, or some kind of like history, that's just like huge and a crazy thing, and not something I went into the book thinking would happen. But just so to go back to your question, the response has been really positive. People don't seem to be put off that like, oh, there's another immigration book. Like, they just seem happy that it exists.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in some ways, when we talk about American stories, every American story or most American stories are at some point a story about immigration,
Well,
right?
yeah.
And we never seem to get tired of, small town stories or, but, even reading reviews of different Latino writers, I feel like there's often this caveat, like, yes, it's a story about immigrants, but here's why you like it.
Right.
But one of the things I love about your book is that thinking about being a young person, there's just so many points of entry in this book that I can imagine almost any person picking it up and finding a character that resonates. You have characters of all ages, from different countries, have been in the country different amounts of time, like different things, disagree. That's pretty unique, I think. I can't think of another book I've read that offered so many different people living in one place.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you want to read an excerpt
Sure.
that sort of demonstrates all of them in one place, because
Sure.
you create that world.
Yeah, I think I'm just obsessed with the idea of like community, and also homes and houses, and so that's why they're all in this one building. I moved around a lot as a kid, so I think for me, even though I was never an immigrant, that idea of like, where do I belong? Where's my home? That's always been a big question in my life. So, yeah, there's 11 different narrators in the book. There's 2 main narrators, but there's one scene in particular where they're all together in the same place at the same time. And I think all you need to know is that this is told from the point of view of Mayor Toro, who again is this 16-year-old boy. His brother's name is Enrique, his older brother. And he's in love, Mayor is in love with this young 15-year-old girl named Maribel from Mexico. Her parents have brought her to the United States because she suffered a brain injury the year before. And they're trying to get her the kind of education and medical care that she needs. We rode the bus to midnight mass with the Riveras. The bus driver tuned the radio to the all-Christmas music station. And when Feliz Navidad came on, I guess since we were the only people on the bus, he raised the volume and shouted back at us, "Here you go, a little piece of home for you." Under his breath, my dad said, "Every year the same thing. If it's in Spanish, it's a piece of home. Well, I never heard this song until I came to the United States." "And every year you complain," my mom said. "You like this song?" "No." "It's like how everyone thinks I like tacos. We don't even eat tacos in Panama," my dad said. "That's right. We eat chicken and rice," my mom said. "And seafood," my dad added. "Corvina as fresh as God makes it." This was one of the few things that could unite my parents, the thread that mended them, their conviction that no one else here understood Panama the way they did. I was sitting in front of them with my feet up on the seat, my dress socks pulled halfway up my calves. I had my coat zipped to my chin so that my mom wouldn't see I wasn't wearing my tie. The Riveras were across the aisle from us. "I like tacos," I offered. My mom sighed. "Why would you say such a thing?" "What about you, Maribel?" I asked. "Do you like tacos?" When she didn't answer, I repeated the question, louder. She was pressing the pad of her thumb against her incisors. She said, "My teeth are really sharp." "So you could eat a crunchy taco?" I asked. "Okay," she said. My mom swatted my shoulder. "Leave her alone," she said. "I was just asking if she liked tacos." "I don't know what that means," my mom said. "Tacos? It means tacos." "I don't know if you mean something else by it now, all this taco talk." That made me laugh. And as soon as I laughed, I realized I hadn't done it in a long time. Too long, And I remembered how good it felt, how it made my muscles warm and filled me up with the kind of lightness that was usually missing in my life. The kind of lightness that was buried under my parents' bickering and under my awkwardness at school. I stared out the window into the dark at the illuminated trail of streetlights streaking through the air and laughed while everyone else on the bus stayed quiet. The next morning, my mom brewed a pot of Café Ruiz, our annual treat, and brought out the rosca bread with almonds she'd made the night before. Our apartment was decked out with the same tired decorations she displayed every year: angel figurines on the end tables, a crocheted snowman cozy that slid over the extra roll of toilet paper in the bathroom, a dried wreath with a red velvet bow, a porcelain nativity scene on the floor. We hadn't gotten a tree, and, as threatened, I didn't get any presents. Enrique didn't exactly get a mountain of stuff either, unless a 4-pack of deodorant and a new Gillette razor counted. Besides him, the only person who got a gift was my mom, and it was nothing more than a lousy set of shampoo and conditioner that my dad swore he bought at the salon, even though anyone could see from the sticker on the back that he'd gotten it from the clearance shelf at Kohl's. My mom placed the set on the coffee table. None of us mentioned the sticker. Late in the morning, the radiators died, and my dad did what he always did: kick them and curse, until he gave up and plopped down on the couch. Not long after, the telephone rang. It was Senora Rivera calling my mom to tell her that the heat was out and to ask what they were supposed to do. My mom told her just to wait, that it would come back on eventually. "The Riveras?" my dad asked from the couch when my mom hung up the phone. "Bet they're freezing their asses off. They never thought they would leave Mexico for this, I'm sure." "We should invite them over," I said. "Why?" my mom asked. I seized up. Why? It wasn't like we had heat either. What was I going to say? Just because I wanted to see Maribel? Because I'd bought her a present about a month ago? A red scarf that had cost me basically all of my allowance, and that I'd wrapped in tissue paper and had been keeping under my bed for her? And now that I was grounded, I didn't know how I was going to get it to her? "We should invite everyone over," I said. "The whole building. More body heat will warm everyone up." "Genius," Enrique said sarcastically. But when Senora Rivera called again at noon, concerned because the apartment was getting colder by the minute, my mom told them to stop by. Then she hung up and dialed Nelia and Quisqueya and told them to spread the word. She pulled out every candle we owned and lit match after match until the wicks were all burning with tiny flames. "It's pretty like this, don't you think?" she said. And I had to admit, it did look nice. Before she could brew another pot of coffee, people were knocking on our door, wishing us Merry Christmas, and gripping bottles of rum in their gloved hands. Everyone kept their coats and hats on. Micho brought his camera, roaming around the apartment, snapping pictures of everyone who was already there. Benny flashing the peace sign. Nelia sitting cross-legged on the couch, nursing a beer. Quisqueya sitting next to her, pretending like she wasn't interested in having her photo taken. Not long after, Jose Mercado and his wife Inez showed up, her gripping his elbow while he hobbled with his walker. Gustavo had to work, Benny told my dad, even though my dad hadn't asked. Movie theater might be the only place that's open on Christmas Day. Hollywood doesn't believe in God, my dad said. Benny laughed. But God sure believes in Hollywood. Have you seen those women? Megan Fox and the mouth on Angelina Jolie? God is in the details, man. My dad raised his beer. Salud! Despicable, Quisqueya said. The radiators didn't kick back on until late that night. But with all the people packed into our apartment that afternoon, it started to feel a little more like Christmas. Everyone shivering and laughing and drinking and talking. When we ran out of coffee, my mom mixed up huge pots of hot cocoa that she made from heavy cream and some chocolate bars she'd found in the back of a cabinet and melted down. Senora Rivera asked if she had cinnamon sticks to put in the cups to make it Mexican style, and my mom found a jar of powdered cinnamon that she sprinkled into the pot. Are you happy now? She joked. It always has to be the Mexican way. Mexico, Mexico, as if the rest of us don't exist. Viva Mexico, Micho shouted from the corner of the room. Mexico, Senor Rivera said. Panama, my dad said. Presente, my mom said, and everyone laughed. Nicaragua, Benny shouted, presente. Puerto Rico, Jose said. Presente, Inez and Nelia chimed at the same time. Venezuela, shouted Quisqueya, presente. Paraguay, said Vito, presente. Then, Feliz Navidad came on the radio. This goddamn song again, my dad said. Oh, come on, my mom said. She started singing along and swishing her hips while my dad eyed her skeptically. What, she said, you don't want to dance with me? Fine, Benny, bang. And Benny took my mom by the hand, spinning her around. Inez and Jose joined in, Jose leaning on his walker while he rocked back and forth. And Micho pulled Nelia up off the couch into a twirl. Almost everyone in the room started singing along, and eventually my dad put his drink down and cut in on Benny and my mom, sliding his arm around her waist. Now this is more like it, my dad yelled above the noise. This is like the Christmases I knew.
One of the things that strikes me about that passage is that so much of the book combines this hope with a real sense of precarity. You know, all of the characters are living really precarious lives. And I wonder how you thought about that balance, or if you thought about it, or it's just something that came out and felt natural.
I knew from the very beginning that I wanted them to have certain dreams that would be thwarted. Mm-hmm. You know, from the like first 3 pages of the book, I mean, they arrive. The first scene is them arriving in Delaware, the Riveras from Mexico, and they've just taken this long journey from their home, and they finally get there near dusk, and they walk up to the apartment building, and Alma, who's the narrator for the Riveras, says something like, you know, that she had wanted the house to look the way houses looked in American movies. And yet, when they come up, there's like trash in the weeds, and there's like rusty staircases, and it's just not, you know, what they had hoped for. And so there's that sense right from the beginning that they're not going to get all of the things that they had wanted.
Which is so hard because the things they want feel so urgent for all of the characters. And for, you know, for me as a reader, there is this sense of wanting so much for things to work out for them, but then this creeping sense very early on in the book that nothing will go as planned, because as you point out, from the beginning, nothing goes as planned.
Yeah, I mean, I think her first few lines, like, she says, back then all we wanted was the simplest things. To eat good food, to sleep at night, to smile, to laugh, to be well. We felt it was our right, as much as it was anyone's, to have those things. Like, that's it. That's all they want, those sorts of things. And they're just not going to get it in the ways that they hoped.
Oh, it's so hard. I found, you know, the book is not, like, spoiler alert, there's no, like, zombies coming after anybody, but it was incredibly suspenseful. I found myself unable to stop reading it because I was so caught up in this anxiety of the way the story picks up. And I will not, of course, spoil the ending because I know everybody's waiting to buy stacks of the books outside. But it really, I felt so invested in the characters.
My dad, everyone always asks me, the book is dedicated to my dad. And everyone always asks me if my parents have read it, you know. And so my dad, like 40 pages before the end, he called me and he's like, I can't read anymore. He's like, I have to put it down. He's like so scared for the characters and what's about to happen to somebody, you know, like he's not sure where it's going to go, but he was so like invested and so terrified for them. And I was like, just come on, you can push through, like, you know.
Yeah. Do you find that this is one of the things that happens to you as an author, that people read your books and then hold you really accountable in this personal way for what happens to the characters you've made?
Oh, yeah. Like, people are, yeah. They're like, yeah. It's hard to say it without giving anything away either.
Give it away.
But yeah, but I mean, like, you know, like, so on the other side of it, that was my dad. So then my mom calls me and she's like, why can't you write happy endings? Like people are really angry about certain decisions that I made. And I'm like, listen, I wanted to break your heart. Like I do.
Yeah.
Because when I watch a movie or when I read a book, like that's actually the response that I want to have as a reader or a viewer. Like I want to leave feeling this like really deep emotional connection, like an intense emotional connection to what I just watched or read or whatever. And so I think as a writer, I want to give that experience to readers too.
Yeah, I mean, one of my friends is the Cuban American writer Achi Ovejas, and I have her.
I just saw her the other day.
Aww. And I just love her so much. But I read one of her books. I don't want to spoil the ending, but I was so angry at the end of it, and I was texting her at like midnight. I finished the book. I'm like, how could you do him like that? Like, I'm so mad at you. And when are you writing the follow-up novel where everything turns out okay? She's like, we talk about this in the morning, But I think that also one of the reasons that your book did that for me too is that, on the one hand, very ordinary, everyday things happen in the book. Really lovely things happen in the book, unexpected, terrible things happen in the book. But the book doesn't feel, the characters don't feel over when the book is over. So the book comes to an end, but it creates this feeling like they'll have other lives. And there's something kind of bittersweet and hopeful even in the middle of all of this that I found.
That's the element of hope there, this little nugget at the end that I think you get. There is definitely a sense, and there was a sense for me as I was writing it, I was imagining what their life would be like going forward. If I were to write 50 pages more of the book, what would that look like? And I sort of had a vague idea in my head. And I wonder, a lot of people ask me if there's going to be a sequel, and I think that's probably part of the impulse behind that question too, is like this feeling, like there is kind of like an opening up at the end of the book. But I wanted to leave it on that note, yeah.
Is there going to be a sequel?
No, hopefully not.
I was like, I wouldn't be sad if there was a sequel.
When I'm done with something, I'm done. I mean, it took me 5 years to write this book, approximately 20 drafts. I mean, and I know that because, I keep them numbered in my computer, so it's like novel 1, novel 2, and then you get to the point where it's like you're naming it like novel, come on already, It's like, but yeah, so when it's done, for me, it's like, it's done, I'm ready to move on to something else.
Yeah. Well,
I'll never say never. Never say never, but.
So I'm always interested in Latino stories that don't happen in New York, Miami, or LA, or Texas. That I love that the story is set in Delaware. And obviously there's an element of that maybe is familiar for you, but I wondered why that was also important to you to.
Well, mostly just because I knew that everyone was waiting for the great Delaware novel, No, I mean, it started off because it's just a place that's personal to me. I was born there. Like I said, I moved around a lot, but I ended up back in Delaware when I was in the end of 5th grade and stayed there until I left for college. So it was really the longest I had spent anywhere, the most connected that I felt to any one place. And it's always just fun, to sprinkle in some of the landmarks, and some of the little things that only a Delawarean would know. So it started like that, but then I was about halfway through writing it, and I mentioned to my agent at the time kind of what I was doing. She didn't know what I was working on, and I was bringing her up to date, and I said something about how it was set in Delaware. And she was like very confused for a minute, and she was kind of like, are there a lot of Latinos in Delaware? And I was like, I mean, yes. And the fact that she was surprised, though, then solidified for me why it was important to keep it set in Delaware. Precisely because I didn't want this to be the obvious story of, something that was set in Arizona or something that was set in Texas or California or wherever. I wanted to show, this is a story that's happening all over in every pocket of the country. This is an American story, And you know, the reason for Delaware is, and it gets explicated in the book, is that there's these mushroom farms across the state line in Pennsylvania that traditionally had brought in different kind of laborers, but from Latin America to work the mushroom farms. And in fact, that's where Arturo Rivera, who is Maribel's father, ends up working in the book. And historically, people were working there, but then they started living in Delaware, where it's a little more economically feasible. The sign, when you drive into Delaware, I don't know if any of you have ever been, but the sign says, home of tax-free shopping. Like, it's her big claim to fame. So anyway, then there were these roots of these communities in Delaware. You know, and people don't really know that. I think it kind of goes with the themes of the book, though, too. The characters are unknown in so many ways. Their stories are unknown in so many ways. Mayor and Maribel are outsiders in so many ways. I mean, the core of the book is a love story, I think, and it's about these two people who exist on the margins of society, who find each other and feel like a sense of belonging. But so in the same way, Delaware is a place that's often overlooked and people don't seem to know much about. So.
And it also gives you that kind of pan-Latinidad, sort of the many different kinds of Latinos there. When I moved here in 1987 to the United States, not to Chicago, we moved to Maryland, which is sort of similar. I never met a Mexican in my life until I moved to Chicago. And you know, I remember going over to my friend Irma's house, and her mom served enchiladas. And I was so shocked that people actually ate enchiladas at home. I know that shouldn't be shocking, but I'd only ever had them at like Chi-Chi's, which is not authentic in any way. Because in Maryland, you know, there were a lot of Latinos, but they were Latinos from all over. Lots of Salvadorians, lots of Panamanians, lots of South Americans. My family is from Ecuador. And so it was a very different kind of culture that in some ways was fighting to retain home, but also having to adapt and find home in each other, which I think we see in the book. Versus in Chicago, I see a lot of people I know, and I'm generalizing here, really defining themselves in relationship to Mexicanness, because that is so much the largest Latino population here. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing that happens in the book, that I don't know we would get that if you said it somewhere else.
Yeah, that might be true. That you might not have quite the diversity of countries represented, and that that the characters might not mean so much to each other. They become each other's kind of like family and each other's life raft. You know, they exist in this one building, and there's the sense, you know, hopefully that there's other Latinos in the like area, but not really in their surrounding area. Like they're kind of surrounded by other neighborhoods that are, you know, representative of other ethnicities.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, again, no, I don't think I'm spoiling anything, but I feel like one of the big plot things that happens in the book is when Alma has to travel on several buses to get to the...
Oh my God, because I hate traveling on buses, and I can speak English, and I can read a map and stuff, and I'm still terrified that like, I'm gonna miss my stop, and I'm like, panic. My husband is here, and he can attest to this, that it's like any multi-leg, like journey that I have to do, if I have to transfer from a train to a bus, I'm like in a panic. So putting Alma, yeah, she gets on this bus and she misses her stop. And I was like, oh my God. Like I was like having, you know, like sweating with them, like writing this scene. Because it was such a, no. And I mean, poor Alma,
Yeah, but she has to get on this bus to go find the place where there's support for immigrants. It's kind of far away from this compound where they're all living. And the anxiety of that.
Yeah.
I read the book right after, this is going to sound really bratty. I read the book right after I had done a 2-week trip to Paris, and I took French for like a year. I speak Spanish fluently. And it resonated with me so much, that reminder of being in a country where I tried to go grocery shopping in Paris, and for some reason they took away my avocado. They were speaking to me in French, and they wouldn't explain to me why they were taking away this avocado, and they kept kind of yelling at me, and I was like, I felt so dumb, and I was just thrusting money at them. And then very early on in the scene, there's very early on in the book, they don't know where to shop except the gas station, and it's that same sort of thing of just take the money, please. I don't know what's happening, and I wanted.
And the cashier's just looking at them, and they're looking back like, what? What are we supposed to do? Didn't we give you money? And so then they just hand over more money because they don't know what to do.
Yeah, and even thinking like this is the only place to buy food that they can figure out, because if you don't know where the grocery store is, how do you even find out where the grocery store is if you don't speak the language and you don't know anybody? And I found that part of the book so funny, but also that's the kind of thing in the book that is so heartbreaking.
I think anyone who has traveled has experienced, that sense of dislocation. Like, you don't have to be an immigrant to have had that experience. It's just, I mean, I've had that experience going to Panama. Last time we were there, we bought sunscreen that we did not need. And it was just like, okay, I'm gonna go return this sunscreen. But this is a culture where you don't return things at a store. And I didn't really know that walking into the drugstore, and I was trying to convince the cashier in my very broken Spanish that we didn't need this sunscreen. She was very angry. And it was just like, I felt so terrible and conspicuous, and just like all of those things that, I mean, anybody who's traveled anywhere has had, I think, probably experiences like that,
Yeah, and I think about, I went through a phase where I was reading all of Bill Bryson's books, and one of the things that's interesting about his book is he kind of travelogues other places. And I love that your book kind of travelogues the United States, of this way of making things that seem everyday and familiar strange again, to remember that every new place you go is a new culture.
Yeah.
And ours is a culture too.
Yeah, like they find oatmeal, and they're like, what is this?
Are we supposed to eat this? I have a lot of questions about what you think. I was reading when I was Google stalking you about sort of all the things. I found a Tumblr that I think you made, right? The Unknown Americans Tumblr.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering at what point you decided to do that.
Yeah, I started a website in conjunction with the book. It's unknownamericans.tumblr.com, and it's called The Unknown Americans Project. And somewhere when I was writing the book, at some point, I had this idea that perhaps I would include, instead of the neighbor voices that are now fictionalized, I had the idea that maybe I would include real voices, like that I would just go out and do interviews and actually include them and embed them into the book. And I backed away from that at some point, but the website is sort of a place where that idea lives, which is, it's just a place that's open to anybody, and it's not just Latin Americans, any immigrant from anywhere can tell their story of coming to the United States. And it's just like a photo and a story, and you can scroll through them all. And the first one that I posted up there is my dad's real life story of coming to the United States. And I've gotten some writer friends to do it, but then I've had submissions just from everyday people who, want the chance to tell that story. And I think it's so important just to have that space. Again, I just think, this is my profession, so I believe in the power of stories, but I feel like it's a belief that's become more ingrained in me as I've gotten older, and even just going around and talking about this book and seeing what it has meant to be people, because, again, there's this narrative, there's this common narrative about immigrants. And to my mind, kind of what was happening was people were hearing the word immigrant, and then and then somehow that meant to them Latino, and somehow that meant to them then Mexican, and then somehow that skewed negative and meant something bad. And I was like, that's just that just didn't make any sense to me. But I think it's because it's easier to rely on those narratives than it is to actually get to know other people. And when you actually get to know other people and begin to understand them a little bit, then it dismantles the fear that we have about each other. I think, we have it much too often, and I think you can see it in a lot of aspects of contemporary society. So I just felt like giving people a chance to tell their stories with the promise that other people would listen to those stories seemed like an important thing to do in terms of combating the narrative or providing a different kind of narrative. So yeah, that's sort of what the spirit of it is.
Yeah, it makes me, when I too, my career is invested in telling stories on stage and in poems, and but I'm always wondering sort of, for whom is the story important?
Mm-hmm.
And a couple years ago, I worked on a play called The Americans, where I was interviewing people about immigration in 10 different states. And I remember talking to the head of the Illinois Minutemen, which is a rabidly anti-immigrant group. And I loved him because he kept calling me a lady playwright. I don't think he remembered my name. He's like, well, you're a lady playwright, which I'm not really. And but what was really striking to me is that he invests all of his spare time in really hateful anti-immigrant direct action, but his granddaughter is half Mexican. And he's raising her and he loves her. And he's like, I have no beef with Mexicans. I have no beef with individual illegals. That's the word he used, not my word. He works construction with people. He says he would never report them. And yet his whole life is dedicated to, and it really kind of threw me for a loop about sort of who the story is for. And I think about what you were saying about the high school students before. On some level, I think there's the hope that individual stories kind of crack open other people's ignorance and hatred. But I think the most valuable thing this story does is remind everybody who feels alone that they aren't, that their individual story is both special and unique and precious and part of an invisible map across the country.
Yeah, I mean, that was always like, it's two sides of the same coin, and that was always sort of the challenge with writing all these different characters was, on the one hand, I was sensitive to the idea that I felt like a lot of people saw Latinos as this like monolithic entity. And I wanted to make sure that the characters were individual, that they were very distinctly from the country that they were from, with certain cultural details that were only from that country. But at the same time, I wanted to show, this common humanity of all of them and how that related to anyone who would read the book too, that everyone's worried about having a good marriage or losing their job or putting their kid on the bus for the first time. Like those are just, common fears and hopes and dreams, all those kinds of things. So I was trying to do, both things kind of simultaneously.
And you have an example of one of those?
No, when you were talking before, when I was trying to say about getting to know each other and stuff like that. I mean, I tried really hard when I went into the book not to write something that was overly political, not to write something that was like didactic or heavy-handed, but in this one section, which is told from the point of view of Micho Alvarez, who's a Mexican character in the book, and all the neighbors in the book, I should say, just get like 3 pages each to tell their story. So this is just a little bit of his story, but this is the most kind of stridently political that it gets in the book. I came from Mexico, but there's a lot of people here who, when they hear that, they think I crawled out of hell. They hear Mexico and they think bad, devil, I don't know. They got some crazy ideas. Any of them ever been to Mexico? And if they say, yeah, I went to Acapulco back in the day, or I've been to Cancun, Poppy, then that shit don't count. You went to a resort? Congratulations. But you didn't go to Mexico. And that's the problem, These people are listening to the media, and the media, let me tell you, has some fucked up ideas about us. About all the brown-skinned people, but especially about the Mexicans. You listen to the media, you'll learn that we're all gangbangers, we're all drug dealers, we're tossing bodies in vats of acid, we want to destroy America, we still think Texas belongs to us, we all have swine flu, we carry machine guns under our coats, we don't pay any taxes, we're lazy, we're stupid, we're all wetbacks who cross the border illegally. I swear to God, I'm so tired of being called a spick, a nethead, a cholo, all this stuff. Happens to me all the time. I walk into a store and the employees either ignore me or they're hovering over every move I make because they think I'm going to steal something. I understand I might not look like much. I work as a photographer, so I'm not in a business suit or nothing, but I have money to be in any store. And even if I didn't, I have the right to be in any store. I feel like telling them sometimes, you don't know me, man, I'm a citizen here. But I shouldn't have to tell anyone that. I want to be given the benefit of the doubt. When I walk down the street, I don't want people to look at me and see a criminal or someone that they can spit on or beat up. I want them to see a guy who has just as much right to be here as they do, or a guy who works hard, or a guy who loves his family, or a guy who's just trying to do the right things. I wish just one of those people, just one, would actually talk to me, talk to my friends, man. And yes, you can talk to us in English. I know English better than you, I bet. But none of them even want to try. We're the unknown Americans, the ones no one even wants to know, because they've been told they're supposed to be scared of us, and because maybe, if they did take the time to get to know us, they might realize that we're not that bad, maybe even that we're a lot like them. And who would they hate then?
That seems like a good point to open up into your questions. I'm sure I'm not the only one with questions and things to say about the book.
Hi, I really enjoyed the book, and I was wondering why Maribel doesn't ever narrate.
That is a question I keep getting asked. It's interesting. So Maribel doesn't get a narration, and neither does Celia, who's Mayor's mother. The only reason, and it's really the stupidest reason, is just because I had this very strict idea, very rigid idea in my head of the structure of the book. And the structure for me was going to be Alma would tell a chapter, Mayor would tell a chapter, and then a neighbor would tell a chapter. And it would repeat that way through the course of the book, which it does. And I knew I only wanted, outside of Alma and Mayor, I only wanted one character from each unit of the building to speak for their unit. And in the case of the Riveras, I knew, for reasons that will become obvious if you read the book, I knew it had to be Arturo, which just necessarily left Maribel out. I think possibly, though, subconsciously, I had this feeling that maybe she was not quite, she's the middle of everything for everybody. Like everything everybody does in the book is motivated by Maribel. And I also sort of just, I think, subconsciously loved this idea of her being the core of everything, without being like a loud, vocal character. That she sort of had this power in her silence still. So, yeah.
Forgive me, it's not about the book. What are you doing now? What are you working on now? And then about the book, any chance it's been opted or optioned for a movie?
Not yet. I'm amazed to tell you, I have a film agent, which is like, what? That seems so weird to me, even that. But yeah, so there's little feelers out, but nothing has been nailed down. What am I working on now? Right now, I'm working on taking care of my 7-year-old and 2-year-old. Pretty much. I wish I was working on a new book. I sort of am. It's coming very, very slowly. I'm extremely frustrated right now. As again, my husband's here somewhere, and he can attest to this, how I've been, stomping around the house and moping about how I don't have enough time to write and not getting anything done. And then the other day, actually, I was tired of hearing myself say that, so I said, I'm going to get up at like 5 in the morning and work from 5 to 7 before the kids are up. And that's what I've been doing. And that's been helpful, but, it's still, you're still just kind of stealing hours out of the day to try to get anything done. I don't know. I'm hoping that this summer I'll be able to get some traction on something, but I have an idea. It's like burning in my brain, but I just haven't had a lot of time to commit to it.
That 5 a.m. thing is so real. I have a 6-year-old too, and the only way to get any writing done is before they wake up.
Yeah.
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 Hi,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Towards the beginning, you mentioned that the idea for the first line of the second chapter came from just this conversation you had overheard. Someone asking, like, we heard that they were Mexican. And you said that this idea of just paying attention to language kind of sparks a lot of your ideas in your writing. Can you talk a little bit more about that and about kind of the importance that language,
Yeah.
in the abstract plays?
Yeah. It wasn't actually a conversation. It was just I don't know, things just appear in my brain sometimes. And so, yeah, that was a case of that. But it's so hard. It's such a mysterious thing to try to break down your actual writing process. I mean, I'm sure you know this, but I mean, I always think of it, the metaphor in my head is it's like kneading dough, I keep pushing the lines out, pushing them out. And I have found, early in my career, I would go into stories kind of knowing what I wanted to happen, oh, this is going to be the situation and this is kind of what's going to happen to the characters along the way. And then I would sit down and I would write those stories, and they were fine, but they were just kind of always flat. There was no element of surprise for me as a writer, and that translates, I think readers can really feel it, that there's no element of surprise for the reader either, and it feels manipulated. It never feels organic. You can always have the sense that the author is back there being the puppet master and controlling every move that the characters are making. And I think there's something deeply unsatisfying about that if you're a reader. So at some point, I decided, well, I'll try to go into it knowing as little as possible and see how that works. And so I would literally just get a line, and then I would think about what's the next line after that. And that's as far ahead as I could see. You're writing in this fog where you can only see one line ahead of you, and you just keep doing that until you finally have kind of built a first draft at least. And the first draft is a mess, because you were just making these decisions as you were going. And the decisions are just based on instinct. You're not stopping every line and asking yourself, where do I go? You're just kind of making these turns along the way based on instinct. And the instinct just comes from years of reading and sort of knowing what you like and are tuned into and stuff. So another example is I wrote a story once, and the first line was, I loved a girl once. That was it. And I wrote that line, and then I was like, that's kind of a lame first line to a story. So then the next line was, but every story starts that way, right? Because I'm answering myself and answering kind of the reader's objections, And then I thought, well, does every story start that way? And then it becomes a story that's not about what you think it's going to be about, because I had that thought at the second line. But you're just basically it's like this call and response. You're always just answering every line you wrote and following it down some kind of path until it leads you to somewhere. Then when you have your messy first draft, though, then usually what I try to do is I look at what I've got and I try to boil it down to one word. What's it about? Is it about jealousy? Is it about loyalty? Is it, for me, this book was about home. Then you go back once you have your word, or this is what I do, once I have the word in my mind, and I try to reshape all of the scenes and all of the interactions between the characters so that they somehow reflect that idea or bring that idea up to the surface. So then by the time you have a second draft, a third draft, whatever, it starts to feel purposeful. It starts to feel like you're almost kind of tricking the reader. By the time they get the version, it's like, oh yeah, this is how I meant for it to be all along, even though as you were going through it, you had no idea what was happening the first time. So I don't know, I just bought this print from Etsy of this girl jumping off a cliff, because that's how writing feels to me. It's it always feels like you're just, blind faith jumping into the unknown. Is this gonna work? I don't know.
I'm curious as to what your intended audience was, not only for age, but I guess, did you want to speak to all types of audiences from different backgrounds, or not only, American citizens, but I mean, would you plan on getting this translated into Spanish to speak to other audiences? And did that change through the course of writing this book? Was it different from the beginning, and is it different now?
Well, the good news is it has been translated into Spanish, which is awesome. Vintage Español did it simultaneously in Spanish and English, so it's available in Spanish in the United States, which is great, and is the first book of mine. This is my third book, but it's the first book of mine that has been translated into Spanish, which is amazing because the first two books were set in Panama. It's like they're kind of ready-made for that sort of thing. But that's really meaningful to me because it means that all of my family in Panama, who's never been able to read my work, can finally read one of my books, which is pretty, it's just pretty great for me. But the intended audience, that's an interesting question. I went and I had a great pleasure of being able to see Toni Morrison last summer. She did an event and she spoke and she was talking a little bit about that idea, about that when she writes books, she's not writing for like a white audience. She's like writing, for Black people. Like she's writing for like herself and people that she knows that are like her, and how important that was for her to be able to think of it that way. And that really struck me when she said it, because I was like, I think I did it wrong. Like, I think probably I went into it thinking that there would be a white audience for the book. And I think I thought that because I was born in the United States and have grown up in the United States, mostly around, I mean, to say I didn't even read a Latino author until I was in graduate school, I hardly, along the way, in all the multiple states that I've lived in, hardly had any friends who were like of color. That was just not like my experience. And so I think I always have felt that that was my audience, was just like this kind of white version of America. But I think it probably did change a little bit as I was going through. I think what happened is then I started to feel like I wanted to write for both sides of myself. Although I will also say that I try really hard when I'm writing not to think that there will not be an audience for the book. I try really hard when I'm writing to assume that no one's going to read it. Because if I think that someone's going to read it, it changes how I write. And I never want to compromise that. I want to write the story that I want to tell, which is part of the reason it took me 5 years to write it, because I felt really strongly. I told my agent, I was like, I don't want to have a contract for this book. I want to take my time and do the thing that I want to do, however long that takes. And so, yeah, one of the things I think I'm always trying for, at least in early drafts, when I'm just producing and generating initially, is to forget the fact that anyone is ever going to read the book. But now you should all read it. Thank you.